I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. So we are again continuing in the Gospels. Christ is still centered in Galilee, around the city of Capernaum. That's where his ministry is for the most part. We've read many sermons, parables, a lot of healing, most recently the healing of the Canaanite woman's daughter. And we read his discourses on the leaven of the Pharisees. He fed the 4,000, and then he gave the keys of the kingdom to Peter. We had that exchange there. We're going to continue now, this time in Matthew. And just like we did with the last account, reading of Peter's testimony of Christ, we are going to read the same story, first in Matthew, then Mark, then Luke, in 3 separate videos. Because this is a very important event that we're going to be reading about here. I want to spend a little extra time on it. In this video, we have a Joseph Smith translation. Now, what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. So let us first turn to Matthew, chapter 17, verses 1 through 13. And after 6 days Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John his brother, and bringeth them up into an high mountain apart, and was transfigured before them. And his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto him Moses and Elias, talking with him. Then answered Peter and said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elias. While he yet spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud, which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face, and were sore afraid. And Jesus came and touched them, and said, Arise, and be not afraid. And when they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no man, save Jesus only. And as they came down from the mountain, Jesus charged them, saying, Tell the vision to no man, until the Son of Man be risen again from the dead. This is the story of the Mount of Transfiguration. Christ himself is being transfigured here. Now, transfiguration is a temporary state that is an alteration in the body, allowing it to stand in the presence of glorified beings without being destroyed. That is what to be transfigured means. Christ, even though he is God, is still in a mortal body. Now, he can't die unless he wants to, but his physical body would still have, most likely, in my opinion, felt the pain of the glory unless he was transfigured. He still needed to be transfigured in order to stand in the presence of glory. Moses and Elias, now Elias, that's the Greek form of Elijah, so this is the appearance of Moses and Elijah. They are translated beings. They never die. Their bodies are altered permanently so that they no longer age, they no longer have sickness, they no longer feel physical ailment or pain of any kind. And so when they appear, they are, though not of a celestial glory, they are still of a kind of glory. And so Christ is transfigured. We also see that the Father is present. We at least hear his voice in a cloud. And so once again, he's not just in the presence of Moses and Elias, he's in the presence of the Father. He is transfigured so that his physical, mortal body is not affected by that glory. Peter, James, and John are also transfigured because they are there. They see this. They are in the presence of glory. And even though they are not directly involved in the event, they are witnesses to it. And in order to see, in order to physically look on that glory, they would also have to have been transfigured, at least to some degree. And so we have here, what this is Moses and Elijah appearing to restore their keys of the priesthood. Now, they're not restoring them necessarily to Christ, because Christ, he's God. He has all the keys are his. They're restoring them to Peter, James, and John. That's why Peter, James, and John are here. It's not just so that they can see what's going on, it's that they can receive these priesthood keys. They've been ordained apostles by Christ, but it requires Moses and Elijah to restore their keys, the keys of the gathering and the keys of sealing. This is very similar to what happened in the last days in the Kirtland Temple when Moses, Elijah, and various others appeared to Joseph and Sidney Rigdon and restored priesthood keys. Was it Sidney Rigdon? I think it was. Anyways, that's what's going on here. Peter, after all this is done, he said, let's build tabernacles. Otherwise, we're build shrines or mini temples to all three men. Now, he's not told not to in here directly, but he is told don't tell anybody what happened. And if you're going to build temples, that's kind of telling people what happened. So he's being said, don't. No, this is an event that is sacred and is to be kept sacred to just these four men, Christ, Peter, James, and John. They're the only ones that know about it until after Christ is resurrected. You'll also know this is one of the few times that we have the Father is present. And we only, it says they heard his voice out of the cloud, but there would be no need for the cloud to be there unless God was there in person. This was the Father coming down, but they were not yet able to be directly in his, even being transfigured, they could not be directly in his presence. And so he was veiled in a cloud, and all it was that they heard his voice. We heard his voice at the baptism, now we hear it again at the Mount of Transfiguration. Not very common that we hear the Father. Picking it up in verse 10. And his disciples asked him, saying, Why then say the scribes that Elias must first come? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Elias truly shall first come and restore all things. But I say unto you that Elias is come already, and they knew him not, but have done unto him whatsoever they listed. Likewise shall also the Son of Man suffer of them. Then the disciples understood that he spake unto them of John the Baptist. The disciples understand that Jesus is the promised Messiah, but they said, wait a minute, didn't the prophet say that Elias would come before you? And Christ is saying he did come. That was John the Baptist. He came. Now it says here he came to restore all things. We know from the Joseph Smith translation that John the Baptist came to prepare and Christ came to restore two different Eliases. So there's an oddity there anyways. But let us look at the Joseph Smith translation now, see what it says. So there's not a lot here, but we have a few things. In the verse 4 says, make here 3 tabernacles, one for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elias, but we take out that first and. One for thee, one for Moses, and one for Elias. Minor grammatical change. In verse 5, it says, a bright cloud is corrected to a light cloud. Not really a difference in meaning, in my opinion. Verse 6, when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face. Corrected, when the disciples heard the voice, they fell on their faces. Again, minor grammatical change. Verse 11 and 12 is interesting. We have this, verses 11, 12, and 13 have significant corrections. Let us read these 3 in the Joseph Smith translation. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Elias truly shall first come and restore all things, as the prophets have written. And again I say unto you that Elias has come already, concerning whom it is written, Behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. And they knew him not, and have done unto him whatsoever they listed. Likewise shall also the Son of Man suffer of them. But I say unto you, who is Elias? Behold, this is Elias, whom I send to prepare the way before me. Then the disciples understood that he spake unto them of John the Baptist, and also of another, which should come and restore all things, as it is written by the prophets. Now that's interesting. This actually seems to be that Christ is saying the Jews confused 2 different prophecies. And there was the Elias who has come to prepare the way for Christ's first coming. But then the Elias come to restore is Christ, but there's also another one who will come. And this makes it sound like Christ is talking about Joseph Smith, who was sent to restore all things in the last days. I'm not sure everything really was restored in the days of Peter, James, and John, because while we read of Moses and Elijah appearing to them, what about the Elias who came and restored the dispensation of Abraham? He doesn't appear in the New Testament. So, is this a prophecy of Joseph Smith now? Is Christ declaring Joseph Smith in this? That's interesting. But we'll leave that here, and we will read the same story again in Mark next, so I will see you there.